Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video, we're going to take a look at Reef Encounter. Reef Encounter is a coral theme game in which players are going to be expanding coral and feeding it to their parrotfish. Let's jump right in with the description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, then I'll be back for some closing remarks. This is Reef Encounter, set up for a two-player game. To set up, each player is going to pick a color, take the parrotfish, the screen, and all shrimp in that color, and they're going to put the shrimp behind their screen. Each player is also going to draw a number of tiles and place them behind their screen based on the number of players in the game and their position in turn order. For instance, this yellow player is first, so he gets 6 tiles, while this red player is second, so he takes 9 tiles. The exact quantities will vary based on the player count. From there, you're going to shuffle up the boards and lay out a number of boards equal to the number of players in the game. These boards aren't owned by any one player and will be used by everyone. On each board, you're going to place the matching colored polyp tile in the indicated space. For instance, you can see here this one has a white polyp tile, while this one has a pink, so we put them out. Then, regardless of the number of players, you're going to lay out the open seaboard and place one polyp tile of each color along the side of it. After that, you're going to take one of the coral strength indicators, which are these guys here, and you're actually going to flip it. It has 2 sides, one side with a star, one side without a star. The one you flip is going to indicate which side to put all the rest on. So for instance, we flipped the star, so all of these are going to go star side up on this board. Then you're going to take one of each color larva cube and place it on the matching space of this board here. So for instance, the gray one we can see goes in this space, while the yellow one goes on this space here. Then you're randomly going to choose one of those colors. It doesn't matter which one you choose. The gray one got chosen here, so it got 3 tiles on it. The one you choose always gets 3. Then the next tile clockwise will also get 3, as will the next. But then the next clockwise will get 2, and the final one will get 1 tile put on it. And you just draw these tiles randomly from the bag. Aside from that, you're just going to form a pool of the larva cubes and the algae, and you're ready to start the game. During the game, players are going to take turns in clockwise order composed of 3 phases, which are feed the parrotfish, perform actions, and then gain new larvae and polyps, and they always occur in that order. The game end is triggered when one of 4 possible events occur. One is when all coral strength indicators are covered by algae. Again, these are the coral strength indicators up here. The next is when all 4 of one player's shrimp are eaten by their parrotfish, so each player has 4 shrimp behind their screen. If they ever end up in this parrotfish here, the game ends. The third is if there's no legal placements left on any of these boards in play, so if they're basically totally full, or if we run out of larva cubes or polyps to refill the board at the end of a player's turn. If the game ends due to the coral strength indicators being covered by algae, or one player's parrotfish eats all of their shrimp, then the other players are going to get one more feed their parrotfish phase, and at that point we're going to score whatever's inside the parrotfishes, and whoever has the most points wins. Before the game starts, there is one brief phase where each of the players is going to feed their parrotfish secretly. So each player, without telling the other players what they're doing, is going to take one of their tiles from behind their screen, one of the ones they were dealt at the beginning of the game, and stick it in their parrotfish. So all players do this simultaneously, and nobody knows what that player put in their parrotfish. After all players have completed this, then in turn order, players are going to grab 2 of these cubes from the supply here, and this is done publicly, although they are going to put them behind their screen. So this guy's going first. For instance, he might take a pink and an orange, and he's just going to take those and put them behind his screen, and then this guy's going to do the same thing, and he might decide he wants a yellow and an orange. So he's going to grab those, put them behind his screen, and now we're ready to start the main game. The first phase of a player's turn is the feed the parrotfish phase. So at the beginning of a player's turn, they can feed their parrotfish a group of coral that they have one of their shrimp on that's at least size 5. So what I mean by that is a coral is a certain size based on how many tiles are connected to it. So for instance, this orange group here is size 2. So if you have a shrimp on one that's at least size 5, the shrimp can be on any space in the 5, you can feed it to your parrotfish. When you feed coral to your parrotfish, you're going to remove a certain number of the coral in that group and return to the bag and place the leftovers in the parrotfish itself. In the basic rules of the game, it's 4 that you remove. So for instance, if this group of orange was size 6 when I chose to feed it to my parrotfish, I would remove 4, put them back in the bag, and then the last 2 tiles would go in my parrotfish. But in the advanced rules of the game, it's 5 that you remove. So it works the same way, except you're going to remove 5 tiles back into the bag and put the rest in your parrotfish. The only other thing to note here is if this is the first coral your parrotfish has eaten, you're going to put your shrimp on the main board here. Otherwise, your shrimp is going to go in the parrotfish along with any of the tiles that he ate. And of course, the contents of your opponent's parrotfish are always a secret, but you're welcome to look in your own if you'd like to do so. So after a player chooses to feed their parrotfish or not, they're going to move on to the perform actions part of their turn. There's a whole bunch of actions they can do, and they can do them in any order. The first possible action a player can choose to do is to play a larva cube and play polyp tiles from behind their screens. When you play a larva cube, for instance, if this guy played an orange one here, he could play up to 4 orange polyp tiles from behind his screen and any number of orange polyp tiles from in front of your screen. You don't start with anything in front of your screen, but we're going to explain how that works right now. I'd also like to take this opportunity to point out that this action can only be done twice during a turn. You're just going to play a larva cube and put it back in the supply, and then you can play up to 4 of the matching colored tiles from behind your screen and any number of matching colored tiles from in front of your screen to the board. But again, only twice per turn, and it can be the same larva color cube that you play twice, or it can be 2 different ones. But anyway, when you're playing polyp tiles, you can place them in any empty spaces of the board. So for instance, in this case, we played an orange, so we can play up to 4 orange from behind our screens. We don't have to even place them adjacent to each other. We could just kind of put them wherever we'd like along the board. But it is more typical to place them with groups of similar things. There's also one rule in the basic rules of the game. When you place next to the starfish space on either board, you're immediately going to fill that space with a tile from the supply, and you would just refill this tile at your convenience later. So if you ever place next to that, you're immediately going to fill that area there. However, in the advanced rules, that doesn't happen. You only place tiles where you actually place them. So normally tiles can be placed on any empty spaces of the board. However, that's not always the case. If you would connect two different groups that both have shrimp on them, you cannot place a tile. So for instance, an orange could not be placed here because there's a group of tiles here and a group of tiles here with shrimp on them, and this would connect them. So orange can't go there. A different color could go there, however, because it wouldn't connect the orange coral. Also, if this didn't have a shrimp on it, you could certainly place here to expand this group. In some cases, it's also possible to place a polyp tile over an existing polyp tile. And the way that works is if the coral is at least too big, so for instance, this coral is size 2 here, we could place over tiles that it's weaker than. We can always find out what's stronger and weaker than each other based on these coral strength indicators up here. Whatever's on the top, so in this case, the orange is on the top, can conquer whatever's on the bottom. So for instance, here we can see the orange can build over this guy. So once it's strength 2, which it is here, we could start placing tiles over tiles of this color. Whenever you do that, you take these tiles and you put them in front of your screen. So that's how you get tiles in front of your screen. Everything that you build over with your guys is going to go right in front of your screen. There is a small caveat here, however, and that's that you cannot build over protected tiles. A tile is protected if it has a shrimp on it or if a shrimp is adjacent to it. So for instance, both of these tiles are protected by this shrimp here. So if there was another gray one here, this shrimp would protect that as well. But if there was a gray one up here, this shrimp would not protect it diagonally. Also, if there's another color next to it, for instance, a white here, this shrimp will not protect that white because it's a different color than the color he's on. So even if you had a group here of 2 oranges, because remember, you have to be at least size 2 to build over, you couldn't build over this tile here and put it in front of your screen because it's protected by that shrimp. Also, it's still protected if it's your own shrimp on the tile, but you can freely move shrimps during your turn, which we'll discuss in a moment. So the next possible action a player can take during their turn is to place one of their shrimps from behind their screen onto the board. This is limited to once per turn though, so you can't just throw all your shrimps out on the board. They can go in any polyp tile. For instance, you could put this shrimp here, you could put him here. Doesn't matter. Wherever you'd like to put a shrimp on the board, he can go there at that time. The only rule here is a shrimp cannot be placed on a coral that already contains another shrimp. So for instance, he can't be placed here because there's already a shrimp on this coral here. Also, each player can only have 2 shrimp per board. So if it was Red's turn and he already had 2 shrimp out on this board over here, he could place another shrimp, but it could not be to this board because he's got 2 on there, so he could place over here, following the same rules. The next possible action a player can take during their turn is to move a shrimp on the board. They can either move it from a coral to the same coral to a different coral or back behind their player's screen, but it has to follow the same rules in that no 2 shrimp of one player's can ever be on the same board, or that 2 shrimp can never be on the same colored coral like that. Also, I want to point out this action and all remaining actions we're going to discuss can be done an unlimited number of times in a turn. The only actions that are limited are using a larva cube to place polyp tiles on the board, which is twice a turn, and then placing a shrimp from behind your screen, which is once a turn. Another possible action a player can do is they can return a tile from in front of their screen. It has to be from in front of their screen to use an algae. Doesn't matter what color you return to the bag, you can use any color algae you'd like. An algae are these little cylinders here. When you use an algae, you can place it in this algae space here or a matching colored coral strength indicator. What I mean by matching colored is this color down here. So for instance, a green algae could be placed on this because there's a green symbol down there. While this one would take a red algae, for instance. If the active player has not yet placed one of their shrimp on this board, and that's by consuming it with your parrotfish, they're going to have to put their algae on this space here. You can only put on these coral strength indicators once you have a shrimp on this board. So when placing in this algae space here, you're going to return any algae that was already there back to the supply. And you're going to take all matching colored coral strength indicators, again, the color match is determined by this here, and flip them over. So for instance, this one would flip, and now you would see different things are going to become different strengths in the game. So you flip all the matching colors, but you do not flip any, even if they have a matching color, that are covered by one of these tokens. So for instance, if this was here and this was covered by this green like so, it would not flip, but any other greens would flip. The only other thing to note here is you can exchange a tile from in front of your screen to place an algae cylinder on this spot here as many times as you'd like during your turn. There's no limit to the number of times you can do that. There is, however, a limit to the number of times you can place on a coral strength indicator. Remember, you can only place on a coral strength indicator if you have a shrimp on this board here. But you can only place on 1 per turn, not 1 color or anything like that. But you could place 1 on a coral strength indicator and then any other number on these down here. But when you place on these, it's going to work the same way, except that space will now be totally locked into place. So for instance, if I was to place a purple one on this space here, all the other purples would flip like this one, but not anything that's covered, including the one you just placed on. Once you've placed an algae cylinder on a space, it is locked in that position for the rest of the game. As mentioned, the game does end if all of these are ever filled with algae. However, in the advanced rules only, a player cannot place the last one of these, that is, to end the game, if they only have the tile from the beginning of the game in their parrotfish. They have to have at least one other tile in there to be able to end the game. The next possible action a player can take during their turn is to return one of their larva cubes to the supply and take the matching colored polyp tile and just put it behind their screen. You can always use these for that, and this is exactly what they're for. They have no game purpose except to make it easier to grab things when you need to do so. And again, you can do this any number of times during your turn. You're just going to return this and then take a matching colored polyp tile. And the last possible action a player can do during their turn is to return a tile from in front of their screen and take the matching colored larva cube from the supply. So for instance, here we returned an orange, so we would get an orange larva cube. In the rule book, it says you can take this cube and put it behind your screen, but the designer actually posted on Board Game Geek a change to this, and that you have to use the cube immediately, either to place new things out on the board, but remember, only limited to twice per turn, or to just exchange it for a tile of the same color. Despite the rulebook, I strongly recommend you to follow the rule that requires you to use that cube immediately, because of some of the game end conditions, it can really ruin the game if you do not. After the active player finishes performing any number of actions in any order, they move on to the end of their turn phase, in which case they're just going to choose one of these groups and take the matching larva cube and all the tiles in that space. So for instance, they might choose this space, they're just going to take all these and put them behind their screen. Then the space they chose is going to get another larva cube with the same type on it and one tile from the bag. Also, any other groups that have less than 3 tiles on them are also going to get one tile. So we can see here this one is a group of 1, which is less than 3, so it gets one more. And this one is a group of 2, which again is less than 3, so it gets one more as well. Any groups 3 or more just stay as they are. The game will proceed with players taking turns like this in clockwise order, but the game ends immediately if a player's 4th shrimp is ever consumed by their parrotfish. Remember, their first shrimp will go here, but the next 3 will actually go in the parrotfish, or when all of the coral strength indicators have an algae on them, so they're locked in place. If the game ends in either of these 2 ways, all remaining players get to feed their parrotfish one more time. They don't get to do the rest of the turn just to feed the parrotfish phase. However, they're going to have to put 1 extra tile back in the bag. So if you're playing the basic rules, that means 5 tiles off your coral go back in the bag. If you're playing the advanced rules, that means actually 6 tiles on your coral will go back in the bag at that time. It's also possible, though unlikely, the game ends from all the boards being totally filled up, or you running out of larva cubes and polyp tiles at the end of a player's turn when you need to refill. In this case, the game ends, but the other players do not get a final feed the parrotfish phase. But regardless how the game ends, players are going to reveal the contents of their parrotfish at this time, and they're going to score them. You only gain points for what's inside your parrotfish, and the way you gain points is every tile itself is worth 1, plus 1 for every coral strength indicator it's on the top of. So we can see here this yellow itself is worth 1, and it's on the top of 2 coral strength indicators. So that's 1 plus 1 plus 1. This is a 3-point tile here, while this orange is a 1 plus 1 is a 2-point tile. We can see pink here would be very strong because it would be 5 points because it has 4 of these and the value of the tile itself. So players would just total whatever's in their parrotfishes, and whoever has the most points wins. Let's go into this sample playthrough. The first thing players are going to do before the game starts is they're going to secretly put one of their tiles into their parrotfish. So they're both going to do this without the other one seeing it, and nobody knows what the other guy has put in there. Then in turn order, players are going to choose 2 of these larva cubes face up so everybody can see. This guy's going to take a pink one and a yellow one, so he's just going to take them and put them behind his screen. And then this guy over here is going to take a gray one and a yellow one as well. So with that, we're ready to start the game. The yellow player is going to go first, and for his feed the parrotfish phase, there's definitely nothing he can eat with his parrotfish because nothing is size 5 or has his shrimp on it. Remember, both conditions have to be met, so he's going to move right on to the perform actions part of his turn, and he can perform his actions in any order that he'd like to. For his first action, he's going to return this pink cube, so he can play up to 4 pink tiles from behind his screen onto the board. He has 3 here that he wants to play. He's going to put 1 here. Now remember, in the basic rules of the game, you would also get a free placement on this space, but we're not going to do that at this time. He is, though, going to place there for his next placement, and then after that he's going to put 1 more right here. Then he decides he wants to lay out a shrimp on that group because he wants to protect it some, so he's going to put the shrimp right there. He could continue taking actions as long as he would like, but he's going to stop at this time, so at the end of his turn he's going to pick one of these groups and just add them to behind his screen. He decides he's going to take this one here, so he gets this cube along with these 3 tiles. They're going to go behind his screen. Then he's immediately going to refill this here, and he's going to place 1 tile on all the spaces with less than 3 on them. So 1 goes there, 1 here, and 1 here. So with that, it's going to be this guy's turn over here, and he's going to take a turn just like that. For his parrotfish phase, obviously nothing happens because he doesn't have a group of 5 or a shrimp on the board, but he does decide he's going to lay out some of these grays. So he's going to play a gray, and he can play up to 4 grays from behind his screen, and remember, any number from in front of his screen, except he's going to do it a little bit differently. He's going to put his first one here, and for his second one, we see that gray conquers yellow, so he's going to eat this one here, and that's going to go in front of his group. Then he's going to put the last one out right here. Then he's also going to throw a shrimp out on that because he wants to protect that group, and he's just going to end his turn at this time. We're going to jump ahead a little bit later in the game so you can see some more interesting situations. Welcome back. It's getting near the end of the game. It's the yellow player's turn. It's the feed the parrotfish phase. He decides he's definitely going to feed this gigantic group here. So he's going to take this guy and put him inside his parrotfish because he already has one here. Then he's going to lose 5 of these, because we're playing on the advanced rules. and the normal rules you would just lose 4. But the rest are going in as parrotfish, so that's what he's going to do at this time. Even if he had other things he'd like to feed, he couldn't do so. You can only do 1 per turn. Then he's going to proceed with his actions as normal. For his first action, he decides to play this white cube here, so he can take all the ones from in front of his screen that he'd like to, and up to 4 from behind. So he's got a whole bunch of white ones here that he's going to use right now. Now he's going to start placing them out on this board here, and then he's going to move this guy. Even though it's the middle of another action, you can still freely move guys at any time you want. You can only place from behind as a separate action though. So anyway, he's going to do this, and he's going to start covering these tiles here and putting them in front of his area, because we can see that white conquers orange right now. So that's what he wants to do. So he's got all these orange ones here. Now he wants to use one of those orange ones to lock something in place. So he returns one of those orange ones to the bag. Then he's going to put a red algae right here, because he likes these to be worth as many points as they can be, because he just put a whole lot in his thing. So he's going to flip all the other red ones that don't have anything on them, and then with that he can continue doing things for his turn. He thinks the game's going to end soon. He knows this guy has a lot of orange in his parrotfish, so he's going to go ahead and discard another one of these to the bag to put a purple thing here, and that's going to flip all the purple ones that aren't marked, which is just this one here. So that makes orange worth a little bit less if in fact this player does end the game during his parrotfish phase. And remember, you can put any number of algae tokens here during your turn, but only 1 on these actual coral strength indicators. With that, he decides his turn is over, so he's just going to draw from the group as normal. He decides he'd like to get this one here, so he's going to take this and all of these to behind his area. This is refilled as normal, but this guy decides he is going to end the game during his parrotfish phase. And the way he's going to do that is he's going to eat this group here, because it's at least 5. Because we're playing the expert rules, he doesn't get any of these because 5 are removed, but that's his 4th shrimp. He has no shrimp left. He has 1 here and 3 in his parrotfish, so the game ends immediately. He doesn't get to take his turn, and this player gets 1 final parrotfish phase. But during this special parrotfish phase, he loses +1 tokens to the bag, so even if he consumes this one here, it has 6 in it, so that's going to be all taken to the bag. But he will get to put his shrimp in there, though the shrimp isn't worth any points. So now that the game's over, everybody's going to reveal their individual parrotfish things, and we're going to calculate the scores based on the tiles that are in them. We can see purples themselves are going to be worth 1 plus 4, so purples are worth 5 each, while whites here are going to be worth 1, 2, 3 each, and oranges are going to be worth 1, 2, 3 each as well. So players would just total whatever's in their parrotfishes, and whoever has the most points wins. Reef Encounter definitely suffers from not being intuitive to new players. In my experience, new players have no idea what to do the first few turns of Reef Encounter because they have a myriad of action choices available to them, but all of the scoring is held off until the end of the game, and none of the values are predetermined. The values of the coral actually change throughout the game as different algae are placed on different coral strength indicators, and certain indicators are locked into place. So it's very hard to grasp how to score points as a new player. As you become more familiar with the game, though, it does become a lot more interesting, and it's fun to definitely attack different people's coral or to strategically make certain sizes big and lock things into place so you can get the maximum number of points at the end of the game. I also strongly recommend you use that small rule change that the designer posted on Board Game Geek, because otherwise the game reaches an unplayable point because somebody can end it on any turn they'd like to just by getting a whole bunch of tiles after eating a certain color of coral. But that change, just to reiterate, is if you take a larva cube from the supply, you have to use it immediately. It's a small change, makes a big difference, makes the game a lot more fun. I like it best with 2 players because when it's not your turn, you can't really do anything in this game, but Board Game Geek suggests it's best with 3, but I just would kind of lean away from it with 4 just because of that downtime. But with 3 people, there's definitely more chaos in eating coral, and I can understand why that's more fun. So if it looked neat to you, check it out. That's Reef Encounter.